In 2015, I was invited to SPA Delhi, Rahul, for a jury. And when I entered the room where we had to wait, I saw Professor Chhaaya already seated. And I was seeing him after almost 20-25 years. And the last time I saw him, I was a student. So I really lost it. Because it was weird to be on the same side, and my prayer went up that I hope he has no recollection of who I am. Because he would have taught so many students. But then he looked at me and said, "You are Leena. Your nose is a giveaway." I said, "Okay." Because, your karma comes back, you've done a little bit of notoriety, and the teacher is probably going to remember you. So I thought, okay, worst is over. And then he said something else. And he mentioned it just 5 minutes back when, we met. He said, "Do you know why Kurula Varki used to call you Lena?" Because I pronounced my name with a single E. And it's interesting, sir, that no conversation on architecture ever it happens without the mention of Professor Kurula Varki. And I think Saurabh, you would have been very proud of you today. So anyway, so he said, I said, "No, so I've given up because ever since I joined, he has been calling me Lena, and I've made my peace with it." And he said, "It's because Alvar Aalto's secretary was Lena." And Professor Varki used to work in Aalto's office. It was a triple whammy for me that they said. And you put me at ease, and we did the juries seamlessly. That is Professor Chhaaya, ladies and gentlemen. Please, a round of applause. He taught us history of architecture, contemporary directions in architecture, and so 30 years later, I'm pretty much teaching the same thing. But he made us fall in love with the course. And it has remained with me till today, which is why I teach those subjects. And when a teacher continues to have that impact on your life, way after the course is over, the teacher has moved on, you have moved on, that person is not a teacher, not a mentor, he's a guru. And sir, our gurus were windows to the world. We had fantastic books accept, but for us, our worldview was shaped by our gurus. And 30 years later, late, very late, thank you so much. And even if 1% of what you gave us, if I can give my children, I'll say, I've done something in my life. A very warm welcome to you, sir, from each and every one of us at the Design Village. And really blessed to spend this moment with you on stage. Thank you, sir. So, this is a book that marks 25 years of Studio Archomb's wonderful journey of which I've been a part since a very long time. So it's my privilege to read a few words from it just to bring out the essence of the book. The book shows how architecture, despite the constraints of time, energy and clients, must attempt to be deeply rooted in theoretical understandings, indigenous practices and global perspectives. Works by the studio evoke an Indian identity reimagined in contemporary thinking and doing. This extraordinary volume provides a comprehensive overview of the studio's work to date and detailed analysis of some of its most distinguished projects while conveying the firm's underlying philosophy and vision. So I would now request Saurabh to please come and ask Professor Chhaaya to go. Thank you.
This is your copy.
Thank you very much.
Then I have to be allowed to touch the feature.
Please. Thank you.
Sir, now the stage is all yours. We look forward to listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saurabh, Archohm, and all the friends who have come today. I'm really touched. I didn't expect to see so many of you today, but it's wonderful to meet again. And so I was earlier going to talk about Archome's practice, but there's already something that I've written about it, which in a very short span of time it puts across some of the thoughts. I thought it's important for us to think about what happens to us in the future, and especially talking about Delhi today, when you talked about what needs to be done, when we saw the map on the floor there, and then we talked about what you all can do together in Delhi, it became something really relevant to talk about the future. There are moments or periods when some huge change is happening. Ujang would remember that for us the 1960s was something like that, 60s, 70s. When we were looking at the Vietnam War, we were looking at hippie culture, we were looking at Buckminster Fuller, we were looking at everything. In fact, if you looked at Architectural Design magazine, half of it was printed on newsprint, so that non-flashy architecture could be shown. And there was a book written, it said How Buildings Fail. Stuart Brand wrote a book called How Buildings Fail. And so the 60s were this time of immense churning in all the fields. Whether you look at anthropology, you look at politics, you look at painting, you look at there was Rauschenberg, you look at music. In all the fields, there was a denial of what modernism had put across. What was modernism? Modernism was a philosophical standpoint, was an aesthetic standpoint, and so on and so forth, which began with the notion that the operation of reason makes man distinct from everything else, and it is reason which is the most important faculty of man, and European man has got it in plenty. All other men, women, European women did not, I suppose. But most other cultures, they were backward, they were irrational, so that all of us in Asia, in Africa, in the Americas, in Oceania, we all were therefore fair game for the colonial powers. So the 60s was one kind of objection to that. But the world is too difficult to change that way. And the 60s was followed by the second round. So that in the last 100 years or so, we have managed to destroy most of the species. We have managed to destroy many geographies. We have managed to destroy much. So human beings with the reason, who were supposed to be masters of everything, were actually the characters who went around creating a mess. And today in the 21st century, the next phase of architectural thought, just as all other thought, is going to have to look at the world in a different way. Unless we do that, disaster is certain. Almost it is evident, like Ahmedabad had rain for the last 4 days, never has in this season. Delhi had rain just today. And we have done all kinds of things to the atmosphere. We have done things to the forests, we have done things to the rivers, we have done things to the soil, we have done things to animals, insects, everything. Why am I talking about this in an architectural group? It is no longer possible to think of architecture as only consisting of inert material. Stone, concrete, steel, glass, or even, well, maybe not wood, but even wood, when it is treated in a certain way, it is thought of as raw material. It is thought of as a resource. The world is no longer a set of places, but a series of resources. And we architects are the agents of doing things to the earth in one of the biggest ways. So if we are going to change in the 21st century, what kind of change? So before we change techniques will need to change, materials will need to change, all that. There are people who are doing that. There are people who are calculating the carbon emission and who are doing all that. I'm not talking about that. There is going to be a change of heart and a change of mind to begin with. And that is the origin of the real change that can happen in mankind. What is it about the present that creates the problems? First of all, there is a linear and straight line notion of time. Time has a past, a present, and a future, and it goes in a straight line from one to the other. So a material comes in, it is used, it is wasted, it becomes useless, is one way in which that timeline. So time as linear. If time is linear, then action results in fixed equations. A plus B is equal to C. If it is not linear, which is the way it was in all the cultures of the world, including of Europe, it used to be a time which was expanding and contracting, was rhythmic, was circular, but was rhythmic in all kinds of different ways, and therefore what had happened was not once and for all, not forever, but it was a position in time which could change. And if we go back to that original idea of time, because architecture, most of us are taught to think in terms of space, but it is equally in terms of time. What you are showing of Delhi is so many hundreds of years of time engraved into the soil. and some few seconds of bacteria, which also are into that same soil. So time, we have to see time in a completely different way first. That is one. Second is the belief in reason as the means of achieving human mastery over uncertainty. Now we know the way of doing this. We'll never have that problem. Never any uncertainty. Whereas the entire actual existence is based on uncertainties, on little dimensions of change which can transform everything. So if we are able to see this, then we are going to have a different notion, not of mastering nature, because we decided that we have reason. First the European masters had it, and then we had it. We became Indian masters of the universe, and African ones, and so on and so forth. So you got this thing of becoming master over nature, mastery over nature. Instead of that, suppose you were a participant in nature, how would your world be? A participant in nature, which means not that you don't do anything, but you do it in a way in which you don't make huge impacts at once, but in slow build-up. Can we think of an architecture which will happen step by step, in a manner in which it creates a potentiality which becomes fulfilled, rather than have one person thinking and visualizing everything all at once? Just now I was talking to somebody about the Ahmedabad construction people and how, yes, Saurabh was saying how good they are. For 50 years, this bunch of contractors, engineers and architects have had an association in Ahmedabad. They've even got a building of their own, Association of Architects and Engineers, Gujarat, where they are continuously discussing how to improve their construction, how to do things. So you find that this kind of a process doesn't have one single brain, but which has 100 brains on the site, in the office. So suppose you are doing something with 100 brains rather than with one brain. Like in any natural phenomena, you will get all kinds of organisms doing things for it to become a mushroom, for example. Yeah? Mushroom will not grow unless there are 500 different organisms. So if you have this kind of thing, the one thing that came to us in the schools of architecture was this Howard Roark of the Fountainhead, is the master architect, single person. His ideas are big, his ideas are correct, everybody else is to do as he says. Instead of that, suppose we had a kind of messy procedure of making architecture, which brings into play all kinds of minds. Will we have a different architecture? Certainly it will not look as neat. It won't be built in such refined manner, perhaps. I don't know, it can. The bridges that were built during the Industrial Revolution, or the cities, they were built like that. Or Jaipur was built by what? Probably 10,000 craftspeople with some formulae. This is the way to put stone together. And each building was separate, different, depending on the context, on the situation, on the need, etc., etc. But there were 510,000 people who knew how to build. So if we stop becoming this elite class of thinkers, and Saurabh, this is something really for your Delhi project, how in the future this kind of, and already there are groups everywhere in the country who are beginning to think like this, who are saying, no, let's crowdsource the idea and let's work with that. And it's becoming something quite useful, very, very interesting. So you're going to have to put away this notion of mastery and live with the idea of uncertainty. Live with the idea of perhaps, maybe, let's try. And with that you will get a completely different architecture. Some of the people whom I have taught might probably think that this guy is now really gone. Because he used to tell us, you got to get it right. And now he's saying, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, wonders change with time. And the more I'm seeing the 21st century, and the more I think about my grandson, the more I'm concerned about the fact that the world is something that we are destroying. And it's not only him, it's me also, and it's my brothers, and so on and so forth, everything. So, just to say why I'm moving away from the control notion. Then we have to give up also earlier. There was a belief in advanced and primitive ways. High tech was advanced, low tech was primitive. I think for a while, if we put away this division and we say, because if you look at how they get the geometry on the Taj Mahal or any of our old buildings, how did they get the geometry without set squares? So there must be some other way, which means that we don't think of primitive or this is just a mason versus a designer. Maybe there is a slight difference, there is some difference, maybe there is quite a significant difference, but not a complete separation. This separation came from the industrial mode of making things, where there would be a manager who sat in one office, which Saurabh is fighting all the time. He doesn't want to be this manager who sits in the office, and so he wakes up at 2 o'clock at night with an idea. And all of you know it also, that we are taught to become good managers, but we are not taught to talk to people. We are not taught how to understand what you are trying to say. And this is, I think, all of us learnt it outside. That to understand what the other is saying, that became a big skill that we developed. And this, I think, has to come back. The last thing that can change in this new 21st century is the consideration as to what all belongs to the marketplace and what does not belong to the marketplace. This is a very important question. There must be several people in Delhi, some good mithai walas, whose mithai gets sold out in the morning and who close their shop and go away. They don't believe in the market. Market में ये बहुत चलता है, करो. No. They said, this is what I make it well, I enjoy it, that's it. I get enough out of that 2 hours of work. I don't want more. Can that feeling come back in our society? That there are things which don't belong to the market. What doesn't belong to the market? Joy does not belong to the market. Enjoyment, pleasure, fulfillment does not come from a market. Therefore, we may have to do certain things to earn enough money to live. That is okay. But then all of our time on the market is going to be a deadening thing. This is the next thing that because in the 20th century, we were all trained that you have to sell your ideas. Just see the word. You have to sell your ideas. And I felt terrible when I was told that. Then I said, okay, I'll come out with a handcart and start selling architecture. And we actually, used to joke about that. So I think that the market is something which we have to say, market has its place. Now you stay there. This, especially for young students, is very important. And I wherever I talk, basically I talk from my position as a teacher, not as a practitioner. As a practitioner also in the office it's the same. And we make more or less no money, but it's okay. We enjoy it. But that apart. So, then if these are the things that need to change, what are the things which will continue or which will develop more, which we will need to develop more in this 21st century? First is the notion, or first is the feeling, the sensing that everything is interrelated. Now the scientists are beginning to say that wood can remember some things, or stone can remember certain things, metal can remember things. So that means that there is this sensing that materials are themselves part of the sensing of the interrelatedness of all things. So right now, as I am speaking, maybe 200,000 bacteria are moving around inside me. Fascinating. That is interrelatedness of all that. And so the interrelatedness of land, water, trees, insects, birds, animals, humans, all of them in an interrelated form. This is something that the architect must begin to work with. And happily, a lot of the younger architects are beginning to think about that. For example, that ring rail that you are talking about, of green, of that place where you can go for a walk, it actually is a return of a certain edge of the city, a return to the insects. It can be a fantastic thing. I had a client, not a client, a friend. He was the chairman of the World Wildlife Fund. he bought a small piece of land in Gandhinagar for building a house. And he built a house there. And there were huge number of termites. So I said, what will you do? He said, no, wait, you got to give me 3 years. I said, okay. So he collected dead leaves and dead matter from anywhere. You know, Gandhinagar mein any tree has fallen down, he'll bring the leaves, he'll bring grass, he'll bring the... And he kept on piling it. Till the soil got mulched and the top of the soil became rich with water holding capacity. So the depth of the soil, which was wet, instead of which in Gujarat in the hot parts, it's more or less 3 inches, no more. It became about that much. And the termites only come up to drink the water up to there. So he says, now termites are there, they are down below. I don't have to worry. They are not eating anything. Now, if there can be ways in which we can think about architecture in this manner, so which means that we will have to know a lot more about biology. In fact, this lecture I was going to talk about, going to title it The Biology of Architecture. Because I think now we are going to have to think in biological terms. If 20th century was the century of physics and mathematics, the 21st century is going to be the century of biology. And that already the computers have gone into that kind of way of thinking, and AI will probably also do that. So we'll probably have a whole lot more organic interrelations between ideas than what we had before. So we'll have to become aware of the interrelatedness. Then we'll have to start feeling that we are a part of and not masters of. We are part of an ongoing world process. It's going on, and I'm part of that. Then what kind of architecture will I make? Will be another question. These are all questions. But I think if we start thinking like this, we might come to a new architecture, much newer than what we have done till date. Modernism will be old hat. Postmodernism will be old hat. This will be something new. So there, and from all of that comes the idea of sympathy and care. That the idea that architecture is made, he'll go away. Then you call him again and he says, no, but there's something messy about that planet. Something messy, I don't know. An engineer who talks like that realizes that the basis of engineering is only conventions, but the real engineering is from the sensing of the complexity of relationships. And this complexity of relationships, if we can see, then we know that certainty is not something that you look for. Certainty, instead of that, you are looking for surprise. You are looking for change, but change which is not so drastic as to destroy everything. So all of that leads to a notion of time which is not uniform. And that is going to change the way we think about cities, the way we think about transport, the way we think about how we organize work and home life. All that is going to change because we are going to have to change how we think about time. Not as something which can be cut into segments in certain ways, but which will have pulsations of rhythm of different kinds occurring one on top of the other. And the whole urban design of cities will change because we think about time in a different way. Already our old cities have been thinking like that. You look at Manek Chowk in Ahmedabad, at night it becomes something else. In the morning it's something else. Afternoon it's something else. And you look at almost any street in India which has not been designed by an architect, you will see that it has life of different kinds at different types of times. Festival times, ordinary days, morning, evening, night. And this is the kind of time process that we better get interested in. Then we are going to make a 21st century architecture, of which there is no example as yet. Not even Archohm's work. Not yet. And we are all going to have this fantastic adventure like they had in the 60s, the adventure of Rauschenberg and Fuller and all of these, the adventure that they had. That adventure in a different way will occur in Africa and South America and India and Australia and New Zealand, things like that. And we give back to the world a different model of how we relate to the whole of existence, which is one way of saying what is architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Chhaaya. What a beautiful reality and future you have shown us. Would you be open to taking a few questions from the audience? Okay. Anyone would like to ask Professor Chhaaya any question? Can we please have the mic passed on? Yes. Yeah, one.
I don't think it's a question. I don't think I am in a position to ask questions from Professor Chhaaya, but he's reminded us once again, and we all thought we've done so much of work in our professional life. He's reminded us that we've not even yet started.
Yes.
Back again. A professor is always a professor by the end of the day.
We've all started.
Yes, and I think this is, I'm so lucky again to be here in one of these lectures. It takes me back 25 years into that CEPT history class, where the first class he talked about architecture without architects. And that was the first lecture of first year. And I think we all remember that. We didn't understand much out of it that time, but having come the full circle today, there's a lot of depth of what you talked about.
Thank you, Professor Chhaaya, for talking about such complex issues in such simple, clear, and lucid terms, and taking a very bird's-eye perspective rather than kind of a tunnel vision of an architect. So I just wanted to ask you about your perspective on an observation of mine, which is, when I was studying architecture in the U, what we learned and what was being practiced is that architecture was mainly being made for the people who would actually walk through the building and experience it in all its glory. And my feeling is that in the intervening years with the internet and everything else that's happened, Instagram and stuff, that something has fundamentally changed. And what in the field of architecture, and what it is that buildings are not being designed for people to actually walk through them. They're being designed for those three images which are published all over the place. And in that shift, I think we have lost a huge range of experience, nuance, light, air, wind, that whole, the glory of that physical experience when you actually walk through a building. And it's condensed into a very narrow kind of literally two-dimensional and kind of a unidimensional, or it's a single scale. You're assessing multiple kinds of buildings on a single scale. And that scale perhaps is, which is the most attention grabbing, in that sense. So that seems to be a fundamental shift in architecture since
Yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to ask your perspective on that.
Yeah. It's true that we have become, how do you call it, completely ruled by two-dimensional images. I think it's important that we try and see how any architect who has a little bit more concern actually does something which really has experiential quality. One of the difficult things is that it takes a lot of time to make that kind of architecture. You have to slog for hours in the office to get one detail which is somehow, qualitative, or to get the light just right. But then Eros Saarinen used to talk about background buildings and foreground buildings. And that background buildings are those which are run-of-the-mill, which are designed in an everyday kind of manner. So maybe the Instagram buildings will be the background buildings now. They will last for few. After that, the Instagram image becomes useless, because the client comes with another 4 images. And by that time, she has forgotten what was the earlier one. And you have a day, it's really nice to sit here because it's dark and cool and so on. ऐसी कोई जगह ही नहीं है. So some few have to be built, and I suppose that this small audience is the audience who can go out and try in various ways, little bit of it at least. Then some way we'll have to break through with that, because otherwise it's really bad. You are right, absolutely. Yeah.
Professor Chhaaya, you may choose to answer or not answer this question. But I want to ask you that in your estimation and your vast experience of teaching and looking at buildings, which would you consider amongst the best in India? You may choose not to answer the question.
No, why not? Look, there is one thing is, I am biased.
You allowed your bias.
To me, architecture building in Ahmedabad, not the other set buildings, just the School of Architecture building is the best building in India. But that is my, please, everyone will have different choices.
Unanimously, sir.
Unanimous for us, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I truly am enthralled, and I'm very jealous of the few in this room who've had a chance of learning from you over the years. And I am very sure I speak for everyone in the room that we are very honored to have had this opportunity to hear you today and spend this time with you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Aditi, could you help, sir?
No,
No problem.
no, I was thinking there might be some other things.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was really wonderful being here. First time I have been to this gallery. In Ahmedabad there is one, as Sheila has, and so it's nice that they have built all these things.
And now, before we close the event, we would like to honor and invite someone without whom this book would not have been possible. Some of you might have noticed him hiding with a camera right up front. Leena ji, would you do the honors of please introducing Phantom?
Andre Phantom, effervescent, ever young storyteller. And they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Andre does not need words at all because his pictures, his photographs, they speak directly to your soul. And we see him as a maestro of his art and craft, and it would not be fair to talk because everybody knows about it. But what we don't get to see is what it takes, what he gives to get that perfect shot. You get to know that from those people who have joined him on that formidable shoot. And I call them designated survivors because along with him they survived the heat, the snow, the tsunami, the meteor shower, alien attack, whatever. And also the absolutely crazy, precarious, hanging on an arm of a flimsy arm of a crane 10 floors up in the air. But they all come back and they say, wow, Andre. So, thank you for being you, Andre, and being with us today. Welcome home. I request Saurabh to please do the honors.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Saurabh, would you like to please close the event? Thank you everyone for being an incredible audience. We have Saurabh here just to close the event about a few snippets of the exhibition.
I think just for that others who came a bit late might not. So just gravitate up to the rooftop, I guarantee chilled beer. But on the way, do navigate yourself through some work that we try to put out as our own reflection of our work, Archohm at 25. Do not miss out on the third floor because that's almost like a gift to you all as your city, so you guys can reflect. Please enjoy the evening. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much.